All right, there we go. All right, hi everybody. Welcome back. This is our fifth episode, so it's been really exciting. And this time we are talking about the transplant journey. I mean, we all know it doesn't just start with the surgery. It is a long process before, and during and after. So today we're going to explore the full experience, and what I've gotten what a lot of things what I've gotten out of these is it's great to know that we're not all alone. People have messaged me to say, you know what, thank you, this is great. I'm glad you're doing this. I felt like it was just me. I felt that I only felt that way. So it's validating to know that it sounds really cliche, and I'm going to break out in song, but we're literally all in this together, right? So it's kind of validating everybody that we're here for everybody. So with that, I will let the conversation start and hand it over to Amy.
All right. Okay. Hi, everybody. Yep, this is webinar number 5. We've posted a few links to our other webinars we've done. So just kind of letting you guys know that if you're just joining us here, you can have access to those as well on CTA Ontario YouTube channel. And yeah, today, webinar number 5, we're talking about kind of the illness journey, that time before transplant that comes up. And yeah, before even then a diagnosis of an illness, when you are told that you might need a transplant. And yeah, we're going to kind of dive into this kind of side of the transplant. All right, so I kind of divided this up into 2 sections. The first section is really about thinking about or understanding or being curious about that whole before transplant experience. Maybe some things that are happening psychologically within the brain or the nervous system leading up to transplant. We are going to start with before the diagnosis, when something doesn't feel right, but there's maybe not any clear answers. Moving into diagnosis, how the brain and body respond to receiving difficult medical news. From there, we're going to talk about those moments there, or the moment when you learn that you need a transplant, and how that can shift your state or your sense of safety or control. And then we're going to talk about that waiting period there, which is sometimes some of the most intense times psychologically, because the uncertainty and unknowns, it's ongoing, and that there is no clear kind of timeline or resolution. So the goal in the first section here is to make maybe a little sense of that experience if you're going through it now, or if you went through that. So kind of, what you felt or what you're feeling becomes just a little more understandable. Maybe you can get a different perspective of it, but less confusing and less isolating, like Kathleen just mentioned. Okay, so then we're going to shift into another section there, where we're going to shift into like more support and strategies, where we're moving from maybe some understandings to some things that you can do to help yourself or help someone that you care about. We'll begin kind of last episode there. We were doing a question period at the end there, and someone brought up pain. So I thought this is kind of a new section here I added in, and I just thought it was really important to mention just how pain is experienced in the brain, maybe give you some ideas on how to reduce the intensity of some pain signals. Um, and yeah, just maybe a little neuroscience there for you. And I'm actually a nature therapist as well in my private practice in Southern Ontario here. So I wanted to just add in a few things about nature, your nervous system, and really how they can help give signals of safety to the brain and to the body. So I just thought I got to add that in there. I find it very, very helpful. Nature is always around and it's free. So I thought that might this would be a great time to kind of talk about that. We're going to look at support, how to find a therapist, maybe some questions to ask. I'm really kind of emphasizing why it's okay to if you want to take some time to find the right fit there. We're going to talk about that. And at the end there, we're just going to do a little review and connect to the broader kind of themes across the webinar series. Um, and kind of just review that kind of thing there. All right, so as we jump in today, so whether you're going through this stage of this journey or whether you've been through it before, just keeping yourself aware here or maybe preparing yourself a little bit that today we are going to be talking about like some of that uncertainty, those medical experience, the diagnosis, the emotional impacts of waiting, that waiting period. So if these parts feel activating or are bringing up, personal experiences for you, please, take a pause. You're invited to go at your own pace here. I'm talking through a lot of stuff. I was just saying before we started that it's sometimes like I'm used to talking to people one-on-one and going much slower than this and seeing how people are responding, but I can't see everybody. And I am talking kind of through things. So if you need to take the break or step away or just simply, listen in a way that's manageable for you. It could just be bringing up some things for you there. So just notice yourself and be gentle. You don't need to take in everything all at once. We're recording. You can watch this stuff later. Okay. So, but just being here and engaging in a small way is also really meaningful. So, yeah, just kind of even now, just kind of take a moment and take a big breath in and that slow exhale to calm your heart rate down. Or if you notice during times you need to do that, please take care of yourself. All right, let's dive in. Okay, so we all know this. The journey here in transplant, it doesn't begin at surgery. It's starting much, much earlier. Maybe you can kind of remember times there when, something's just starting to feel off in your body, when answers are kind of unclear, your sense of safety kind of begins to shift a little bit in a way that you didn't really fully understand yet. Um, and so, yeah, for a lot of people, when we're thinking about illness, um, there's this period before any diagnosis that can feel really confusing or really unsettling. And you might, like, you're sensing that something doesn't feel right, but there's just no clear explanation. So maybe you're really noticing that fatigue or pain or just subtle changes. They're just hard to describe. Um, and at the same time, you're searching for answers, maybe going to a lot of doctors' offices, and there's just a lack of clarity from the outside people looking at you. Okay. So you might end up experiencing just like unclear, inconclusive test results. Um, Maybe some people experience being told, like, well, everything's looking normal. Yeah, or you're just getting the sense that maybe you're not being taken seriously, or you're not fully understood, or you're not validated. Um, and that really, creates that different kind of stress inside the body and the brain. So inside your whole system, your body is signaling, oh, pay attention, something's wrong. Um, it's starting to mobilize, it's starting to scan. It's your brain's kind of like, oh, forcing your attention there. But there's nothing concrete for you to organize around. So there's no clear diagnosis yet or no plan yet. There's no timeline. When that nervous system stays activated over a long period of time, um, it begins to accumulate, right? So those repeated experience of the unknown or of uncertainty or lack of clarity, we can call those they're micro traumas or little T's. In trauma world, we call them like little T's, big T's. But what happens there is those little T's or micro traumas, each moment on its own doesn't seem overwhelming, but together they build and they begin to shape how you feel inside your body and how you relate to yourself. Maybe you start to notice a little more anxiety, heightened awareness of your physical body sensations, that growing sense that you maybe of a little bit of dread or that you can't trust what your body is telling you. And in your brain, you might have some cognitions or questions that form about what is happening, um, what's happening to me. So it's not necessarily just a thought either. You know, somewhere in here that it's a reflection of what your body or your nervous system is trying to tell you something, or you're trying to make sense of something that just seems so unresolved. Okay. So, um, yeah, I really wish I could ask a whole bunch of questions here about people's experiences and that because it would happen so long ago for a lot of people that you kind of might not even have like recalled that being like such an uncertain time, right? So it's just part of the story, right? Okay, so eventually then a diagnosis is going to happen. And along the way there, you might have thought, well, I just need to know, I just want to diagnose, I just want some answers. And people expect, or we just kind of naturally expect that maybe it will bring some kind of sense of relief. And finally, I have this answer and I can settle down a little bit. I'll know something. But what happens instead could be very different. It could be that your system kind of hears this medical news and then your system kind of goes into a little shock. So that you might get a sense of numbness. This is where a lot of people have difficulty taking in information, kind of dissociating a little bit, and or like being there, you're there, you're listening, and then you go, you get in the car or something, and you're like, I don't even remember anything of what was just said. And I know that that was really important. And I felt like I was there, but now I don't recall. So some people also, upon diagnosis, might notice. Oh, Kathleen, your mic is on there.
Sorry.
That's okay. Some people describe a feeling like um, they're like watching things from a distance, or they're like just dissociating a bit. That's kind of what I'm thinking about dissociation there, where you're the witnesser and not really fully participating, or um, in that kind of sense. Or they might notice like, oh, I just suddenly shifted um, into action, without feeling any of the things that were happening, right? So many different responses inside these moments, right? And I just want to really put out there to everybody that it's not a failure to cope in some way or another. Your brain and your body once again, we talked about this a lot in the last few sessions here, but your brain and your body are doing exactly what they're designed to do in the face of overwhelm. You're shifting into a different state, maybe some mobilization or immobilized states. And your body and brain there, it's really prioritizing, what do I need to do next? So once again, you're going to have emotions, but maybe you're not going to be able to process all those emotions. So the processing, it doesn't disappear. It's just on pause. It's getting postponed while you do that functional, practical stuff. All right. So it really becomes important that part I kind of talk about it a lot because it's an important part of understanding why later on you start to feel that emotional impact more strongly later on, maybe even after transplant. Okay, so but that's because, you're in those different states because your system, you think about that, it's been activated very early on. It's been held in uncertainty, and now it would be moving through some sense of shock. Okay, while all at the same time, you're continuing to function, be practical, and you're moving forward in some direction or you're heading in some direction. So I hope when you look at it kind of from that perspective, um, it makes a little more sense of that experience, either that you're having or that you had, about why it feels that way. Once again, not because something's wrong with you, but because your nervous system or your brain or your system here is responding step by step in those practical ways. Um, because that situation is uncertain and it's intense for you and personally, and it's still unresolved over time. There, it was unresolved. All right. Okay. So learning that you're going to need a transplant. So once again, moving, that's another step, right? But it's a bit of a turning point in the whole process. When you're told that you're going to need that transplant, it's different from being diagnosed with an illness. Okay. At diagnosis, there's distance from this still. Maybe like, oh, it's a possibility, or you're told, like, yeah, you're probably going to need that one day. But now you're told, you need a transplant 100%. There's something that shifts a little bit. Um, because now your life depends on transplant and um, it depends on that intervention. And it's that realization there can land in like a really deeply emotional way or just like deep inside, if you know what I mean. So that brings that heightened awareness of mortality. Um, and if I'm triggering you here, or if you're noticing things, just take a breath. Because for many people, this is just it's a hard moment. Mhm. So, you know, there's a sense there that suddenly happens that, you don't really have a lot of control here, and things are urgent and more serious and more real. Okay. So that question, although it becomes bigger about mortality and fragility there, it can also be quieter and much more internalized, right? So that internalization is really powerful because you're now asking questions like, will I survive? What is my life going to look like in the waiting period or afterward? And that's kind of sometimes when your identity kind of it's very big and unknown. So once again, this is where a lot of therapy, you really got to understand here that they're not just thoughts that you can work with here. Those are reflections of a mind trying to reorganize around a reality that's 100% different than before. It's fundamentally different than before. So, and at the very same time that this is all happening inside of you or internally, you're still going into or going through that functioning practical mode. And you're finding yourself, okay, I got to go to this appointment. I'm gathering up more information. I'm making plans. I'm following all this medical advice. So you can see these two really, things they're happening all at once. So, that sense of really needing to stay organized and focused. So once again, that internalization here, it's there, but it might not be getting processed. All right. Okay. So, systems, your system, your body and your brain, yourself here. your, I guess, survival modes, you can call them. But they prioritize doing over feeling. So just keep that in your mind. So that kind of really leads us into this next phase, um, which can be really intense for a lot of people, which is that waiting period. And in this phase, you're not trying to figure out what is happening. You know that. You know exactly what's happening, but it's still not resolved, and there's a lot of unknowns. So you're not in this immediate crisis. You know you're probably going to get there, but there's nothing you can do. You just have to get there. Um, so you know that you're not in an immediate crisis, but you're also not safe. You're not safe through it. You're not through it at all. So you're living in uncertainty and unknowns. And the brain, ooh, especially adult brains, I'll make that distinction here. Adult brains do not like uncertainty. So whether you're a recipient, a caregiver, a family member watching this, I want to kind of quickly jump in here with, watching this and being a caregiver or a family member. This is also a really difficult time because you're involved in this unknown. Okay. So once again, brain sometimes doesn't distinguish between I'm watching someone or I'm going through it. So just keep that in your mind. You can be an observer and be going through this at the same time. Um, Okay, so you know what's happening, you know what you're going to have to go through too, and your brain it does not like that unknown. Okay, your brain is always trying to predict or anticipate or create a sense of control. But in this situation, once again, there's no clear timeline, no exact answer for when those things can change, and that's very, very difficult space to live in. Just want to validate that for folks, um, because your nervous, like your body, your nervous system, and your brain, it's staying activated. So constant thinking, going over a lot of scenarios. That's your brain trying to get you ready for all those different scenarios. Monitoring your body more closely. Difficulty relaxing, trouble sleeping, and it can feel like your body is always like got it's always like slightly on. Okay, always checking, there's a little always scanning going on. Um, and your brain there, those questions that are coming up in your brain might be, oh, is something happening? Oh, that feels different. Is something changing? Oh, I need to be ready. I need to be ready. Should I report this? I better write this down. Googling, what is a symptom? Like trying to, once again, your brain's just trying to wrap its mind around something that's very unpredictable. All right. It's trying to detect and respond to those potential threats. Because you know that something's going to happen, but there is no clear endpoint, no clear date. You don't, the brain, the body, it doesn't get that signal to stand down. It has to stay active. And that's really important to understand because your all those kind of responses here, the constant thinking, maybe some heightened anxiety, fear coming up, uh, those things are not problems. Once again, they're not signs you're not coping well or you didn't cope well. They are adaptive things that are happening inside of your body and your brain. It's trying to protect you in a situation that is ongoing and uncertain and unresolved. So when you look at it that way, I hope that can that word adaptive, I think a lot of people in all medical traumas here, like it's kind of, you're told all the time, oh, you're being so resilient and you're being, you know, you're doing it, you're getting through it. That word resilience can like cringy after a while. But because really what's happening here is you are adapting to your situation, and it's not the, a situation that you're you're seeing an end to quite yet, or that you want to have happen to you, or anybody wants to have happen to you. So if you can try to maybe even change that language in your mind about you adapted to the environment that you were in or to the situation that you were in. So it's adaptive. Um, so not a, like things are going right when you're adapting in your body. Okay. That's what happens. It can kind of stay in that adaptive state. Um, when, now we got like the something's wrong, there's an illness, you're diagnosed, and now you're told you need a transplant. So you can see here that this is a long period of time. All right. So you've been in that for quite some time. All right. So we're going to move into section 2 here. Um, okay. So, yeah, question period last time we had a question about pain, and I just thought, oh, this is a really great subject. And so I thought I'd just throw it in here and take a few minutes talking about pain. Um, Pain or discomfort. I guess there can be some different, obviously, everyone's going through something different that's watching some kind of different situation or wherever you're at in the journey. But pain is a part of medical trauma. Okay. So, especially pain during periods of uncertainty and stress. So, one of the most important ideas to kind of understand is that pain is not just something that is happening in your body. Okay, pain is created by the brain. Okay, pain is actually felt in the brain, and then we got these peripheral nervous system that is like kind of our how we sense pain, where it is in our body. Um, so once that doesn't mean that this pain here is not real. If I like broke my arm, let's say, I'm feeling pain. It's registering up here in my brain, and I'm feeling it down here. Okay. So definitely still feeling it, but pain is this protective output, I guess that you can kind of start to think about of the brain. So your brain is taking the information from the body, like pressure, inflammation, tension, or some kind of major change. And though, like those symptoms on their own, maybe not pain yet, but the brain takes those signals and then asks some important questions like, how dangerous is this? And what's happening in the body? What is your past experience? What's the current context? How safe or unsafe do things feel overall? And based on all of that, this brain, it decides how much protection you need. And pain is one of the main ways the brain is going to protect you. So you can kind of um, think of pain here as less of a direct measure of damage and more of a measure how much protection your brain thinks that you need in that moment. So that's why pain can change. And sometimes it can change really dramatically depending on the situation. So, for example, here, you can have more pain when you have high stress, or more pain when there's more uncertainty in life, or when your body feels under threat, or when your attention is focused on that sensation. It can increase the pain. All right. So, this is, I think, from my experience here, it's really relevant in that waiting period, in these in between waiting moments. And I mean, something I didn't kind of address before is, for some of you, this is like these are like cycles, I guess, where you're kind of like getting one, you're feeling something different, something else is wrong. Then you're getting a different diagnosis. Then maybe you need a different transplant. So just kind of, I just want to acknowledge that some of this is cycling through here. Okay. So just want to acknowledge that. Okay. So, in that in between here, where you're maybe before transplant or before some kind of surgery you need or something, um, remind yourself here that your system is already in that state of heightened awareness, and the brain is already, a little hypervigilant, scanning, monitoring, trying to anticipate what's going to happen next. So when these sensations arise, the brain might interpret them as more threatening. So it comes up as an increase of pain as a way to get your attention, and to keep you safe. Your brain's just trying to keep you safe there. So once again, not something that's going wrong. Your brain's just doing its job with this heightened level of sensitivity. Okay. So how pain works normally is in this like typical situation, your body's going to experience pain and the brain is going to process it using um, a network of, different areas. And these areas, they're not just responsible for the sensation, they're also responsible for emotion, attention, memory, meaning making. Okay. And in acute, like short term pain, like, oh, I broke my arm, only a small portion of the brain is involved in processing that pain. Okay. So you can kind of think about it as like, I don't know, this is not true, but there's like five neurons and they're going to pay attention. Oh, you broke your arm. I'm going to send you these signals. There's a broken bone here, over here. And, like that team, I guess, of neurons is assigned to pain. While the other neurons, they're still available for everything else, like thinking clearly, regulating your emotions, connecting with other people, um, experiencing something different than the pain, if it's like a little ongoing. So pain comes in, it gets processed, and then the system like settles back down. Okay. But when pain and stress happen over and over again in this journey, in a lot of medical or illness journeys, um, something changes there. Okay. So this is where I talked about this in our question period, but I want you to imagine like this little pain party going on in your brain. All right. So at the beginning, pain party, it's just a small, nice gathering. Only a few guests, small number of neurons here are involved. Okay. The rest of the neighborhood, just doing its regular jobs. Okay. So when the system then is exposed to that repeated pain, maybe the pain is ongoing or flaring, or medical procedures, uncertainty, fear, stress, or loss of control, your brain starts to think like, wow, this must be really important. We need more resources at this party. And so it invites more neurons to come and join the party, more attention, more energy, more processing power. And over time, this party, this small gathering, it becomes a really crowded party. Okay. So now I want you to kind of think about this whole idea of neuroplasticity, right? So it simply means your brain changes all the time. It changes based on what it repeatedly does. So that original, five little neurons involved in pain, now it's growing. It's growing to 20, 25, and that's a really big shift, right? So now you can say that your brain, it shifted, it changed, it learned something, and it's become really good at producing and detecting pain. So even if your original injury or medical issue, even if it hasn't really changed, maybe, oh, that really felt uncomfortable. Now it's starting to feel like more intense, more urgent, more overwhelming, even though people are telling you, well, nothing's really changed. So that's a big experience in all of this and kind of medical world is, those symptoms, like nothing's really changed in there, or you shouldn't be feeling more pain. This is kind of maybe helpful to understand. Okay. So maybe it is something's getting worse, 100% listen to your doctors. But maybe it's not because something's getting worse. maybe it's because your brain learned here, oh, gotta turn the volume up, need to stay safe, need to pay attention, need to get your attention over here to that space. Okay. So in the transplant journey here, your system's often gone through prolonged discomfort, repeated procedures, longer hospital stays, ongoing uncertainty, and your brain, it's always adapting there. And it's becoming more and more protective and maybe here more sensitive, more alert. So, this kind of comes into what we talked about before when we're talking about after transplant, where you're still noticing, oh, my scan's looking all right, or this test is coming up good, but I'm still not feeling good. I don't feel like myself. I should be better. Why am I so overwhelmed? Um, Once again, learned protection here, right? Your brain learned something. So now it's just doing it. Okay. So, the more and more the brain recruits to this pain party, um, that means that some of these neurons that were doing other things, they're not fully available for those other jobs that they were doing. So this is where you might notice that memory, concentration, being affected by that, or if you can think about when you've been in pain, obviously, you don't have as much decision-making skills, and your mood changes, and maybe your connection with others. Um, and as a caretaker or family member or someone watching your person go through that, you might notice some of that stuff too. And so maybe that's what's happening if someone's in pain. It's just like a good perspective to take, especially when that connection seems a little off. From the outside, too, maybe someone watching might notice an increase of anxiety or depression. Maybe you as a caretaker, caregiver, or family member are experiencing burnout yourself. So sometimes you got to kind of consider this when you're thinking about managing pain. All right, um, so just to normalize this a little bit, your brain is just kind of over allocated to protection there. All right. So reminding yourself that your brain taught itself to do this a little bit, and for lots of different reasons why. Obviously, we needed this to survive, or, in some cases, you do need to pay more attention to this. So, just noticing all that, this is kind of just important for you to take into consideration that something like this might be happening too. Okay. Um, Totally not psychological weakness at all. Um, Not doing something wrong. Your brain is doing what it's doing. It's neuroplasticity there, working, it's learning something, it's adapting, trying to protect you, it's changing, it's learning something new, and now it's doing it. Okay. So your survival is in question. So makes sense that it's doing that. Okay. Good news, what you learn, you can unlearn and learn something different. Okay. So just like the brain recruited more neurons to the neuron party or the pain party, it can also begin to kind of send them home. All right. So you can do some of this like psychological work inside of therapy or inside of groups, or maybe you're even doing this naturally on your own. A lot of people notice they try to do this naturally on their own, where you're trying to reduce the intensity of the pain on your own, or maybe you learn about it in therapy or something. But you kind of can think about um, redistributing those resources back to thinking, connecting, and feeling, living more fully, or maybe a little bit more toward how to live or manage the pain. Um, so this is where strategies like reducing the threat, supporting your nervous system, working with pain differently, and maybe some of even these ideas of, how we're going to have some talk about some nature interventions next. It can really kind of it all begins to matter, because what you're really doing there is you're reteaching or relearning the brain, or you're teaching the brain again that you don't need as many neurons at the pain party anymore. Okay. So when your brain starts to feel safer, it doesn't just change the pain. You actually are beginning to give yourself back some access to those things as you're kind of reallocating those neurons again. Okay. So one way to do this is I kind of got these lights here is like I would like if you're thinking about pain, I mentioned this idea of pendulation kind of back and forth between a place that, yeah, I feel the pain, I'm focused on the pain. Then you kind of move to a place in your body that feels neutral or calm, and you help your brain kind of notice that, oh, there, I can bring my attention to this other part, and it's not just pain. So maybe like you're recruiting some of these to pay attention, some of these neurons to pay attention to like this neutral feeling in your body again, and pay attention to the signals of safety coming up in your body. And another way to do it is called dimming the pain. So, I mean, working with a therapist here, I'm not sure if much of this is kind of on YouTube or anything, but you can kind of think about noticing the pain. Obviously, you notice pain, and you can sit with it for a moment, and then you can think about, closing your eyes and thinking about kind of like a dimmer switch where you're just going to kind of dim down the lights at the pain party a little bit. You're going to close off a light in, you know, a place where you don't need to be having that party anymore. But just kind of using that whole idea of like a dimmer switch or a dimmer switch and just kind of like take using your breath. Um, So, kind of noticing there that just the way pain was turned up, you can maybe turn the volume back down or turn the lights back down or dim. Okay. Not instantly, not by forcing it, but just by changing, some signals that the brain is receiving. So, when the brain senses more danger, you know that those lights there, they're going to be brighter. Okay. Or the volume is going to get turned up. All right. So when the brain senses more safety coming up from the body, it can begin to dim the lights down or turn the volume down on that response. So the goal is not here to fight the pain, forget about the pain, move on from the pain. It's beginning to send the brain different information. So I'm safer right now, or I feel calm in my on my hand. That feels good. That feels calm. So you can kind of start to notice these different things. Okay. Um, yeah, so you're acknowledging the sensation, but you're working on acknowledging it without alarm. Okay. And you're reducing the sense of threat by maybe saying stuff like, this is my system being protective. And you're shifting your attention great gently. So you're not ignoring the pain, but you're not locking into it. Okay, so you're supporting the body with safety signals by like slowing your breath and noticing your surroundings, adding warmth or grounding. And all those are ways of communicating through the body up to the brain and you're helping to update its interpretation from turn on all the lights at the pain party. This is dangerous to, okay, you know what? Let's just kind of move toward that small gathering again. This is manageable. Um, and you're really kind of talking to the brain by using those body sensations a little bit. And over time, that can change that intensity of the pain experience. All right. Okay, let's kind of talk a little bit about interventions. Um, so yeah, I literally do walk and talk therapy with people. I find it so helpful, just using nature as like a third party in the therapeutic experience. When your system has been through a very prolonged uncertainty or stress, medical trauma, it's constantly looking for a signal of safety. Um, Nature is just one of the most accessible ways to begin sending those signals to your brain using your environment. So nature provides um, something that's kind of missing in a lot of medical or clinical settings. And and even maybe even, you're kind of stuck in a lot of those settings when you're going through the transplant journey. So um, nature provides this like predictable sensory input. It does create a visual calm and consistency, non-threatening, you know. There you want to you can I'm sure you've all been in this experience where it feels like there's no alarms and you can just be. And nature really kind of adds to that grounding things. There's no, when you're sitting on the bench by the water, maybe in a park, no high stakes information is coming at you, hopefully, unless you have a phone with you, put that away. Um, but because of that, your brain can actually just very quickly shift. It can be subtle, but you could like you're probably shifting out of that survival state. Okay. So even brief exposure to nature can start to reduce your body's activation to its surrounding, right? So, um, well, one way is green grounding. So this is kind of an idea, um, that kind of refers to environments like forest, parks, the grass, the trees, natural landscapes, those environments that are just rich in patterns that the brain recognizes as safe. So like soft movement, the rustling of the leaves, organic shape, organic colors, natural colors. Um, Unlike the medical environments, which are often like bright and sterile, or and can actually, be unpredictable, nature can be consistent and regulating. So when you're in a green space, your nervous system begins to downshift. So not all at once, but gradually. So you might notice there your breath just slows, your body is slightly softer, your thoughts become less intense. It's kind of looking at these different things. So those small shifts are what begins to retrain these neurons in your brain and retrain your nervous system into noticing signals of safety. You're hearing the birds again. Birds have this higher pitch signal of safety. If there's danger around, you're hearing birds and they're flying away, or the lack of birds can sometimes be unsettling because in nature, because, well, what's going on? Something must be going on because the birds have left. And so even when you can listen to birds is can be very a shift, a downshift. All right. There's also something called Blue Mind, great book about it. You can look that up, but it's just basically talking about this idea, this calming effect that we get when we're by water, like rivers, lakes, oceans, or even just watching kind of water move. It has a unique impact on your brain and it holds a gentle attention. Um, so your brain will kind of notice it and it will hold attention in a very gentle way. So it can reduce some of that noise, the mental noise. Um, and sometimes depending where you are, if like for example, if you're, sitting by a lake or an ocean or something, you have an idea of spaciousness and you don't feel like so closed. It's more spacious. So that's why many people notice when they're near the water, their thoughts will slow down. There's a lot of grounding that goes on in nature as well. Where we're touching something that is, connected to the earth, or our feet are on the grass. We can like touch a tree and have like kind of almost like a electrical kind of feeling there. Lots of things about that as well. But from a nervous system kind of standpoint there, um, there's just a sense of maybe being present or accepted. There's not a lot of expectations in those areas. So in those environments, it's incredibly regulating for a nervous system for your body. So maybe like you could even like notice or think about when this has happened to you where you're not necessarily always thinking about what you need to do next. You're kind of moving out of that functional practical and you're just allowing yourself just to sit and just be here and be present. Okay. So lots why that matters, why nature is great, maybe in the transplant process. Um, there are so many unknowns. There's timelines you can't control, constant monitoring, and a sense of needing to be ready. Your brain is staying alert. So nature here can offer a counterbalance to that, and it can give the brain a different set of signals. So nothing urgent is happening. There is no immediate threat. I'm allowed to just settle in, even if it's just briefly. And those short moments can help reduce that overall load on the whole system. Okay. So doesn't have to be anything really complicated, just sitting outside for a few minutes, walking in a quiet area, noticing the trees or the sky, listening to water, looking at nature through the window, looking at nature pictures can do it. The goal is not to force relaxation. It's just to expose your system to different environments that are naturally signaling safety. And over time, once again, those moments add up and they help your brain rewire and maybe give it a moment to maybe fit in there a little narrative of like, I don't always have to be on high alert all the time. Okay. Okay, so when we're talking about, supporting this nervous system and rewiring the brain, we're not always talking about doing more. Sometimes you're placing yourself in environments where the system can actually start to do less. Okay, and like we just talked about, nature is one of those processes or places. All right. Okay, so quickly going over here, finding a therapist. I really want to quickly talk about this. I know a lot of people have talked to me about finding a therapist in their spaces or in their provinces. Um, okay, so all along the journey, I think obviously I'm a therapist, so I'm a fan of therapists. I have my own therapist. In California, everybody's got a therapist. So just kind of removing stigma about asking for help or reaching out to someone. So kind of removing that stigma from yourselves. Because, getting support, whether it's from a therapist or a religious leader or a group or peers, it does play a really important role right across this journey. Once again, not because something's wrong, but because your system's been through a lot and often without that clear opportunity to integrate what's happening. Other people can also help you regulate your body. We've talked about that before, this kind of idea of co-regulation and getting yourself around someone that is more regulated. That can be really, really helpful. So, yeah, when you're looking for a therapist, you kind of want to ask when it has to do with medical, whether you want to talk about it as medical crisis or medical trauma or something you went through medically. You do kind of want to think about a few different approaches that can support your work at feeling a little more safety. Okay. It's not just, and often it's not just one thing. We've kind of talked about a lot of things over the last webinars here. Um, like you're probably going to hear from a doctor that cognitive behavior therapy. It's very, you know, doctors, they know it. Okay. So there's a lot of that there. You're probably going to hear that. It can help with understanding and shifting through those patterns that developed around fear and uncertainty and health, and maybe like what beliefs you've suddenly, like you've kind of created over this journey. Another thing that I really encourage is that you ask about somatic work that the therapist can like integrate into the cognitive work. So somatic means body. Um, it really kind of works directly with that nervous system and helping the body come out of that constant state of activation. Um, I really love EMDR. I'm an EMDR therapist. So, EMDR is really trauma focused. It's taking maybe like different trauma scenarios that you've experienced and it's working with them directly, those memory networks. Lots of great things to say about EMDR. There's lots of different things, but just kind of ask that therapist, like, what do you use? What do you specialize in? Um, and try to remind yourself that you're kind of looking for healing that happens across your thoughts, like your cognitions, your emotions, and the body. So all three are involved with how we experience and store stress, especially when it comes to do with some intricacies of medical situations. Okay. So just as important as the type of therapy is finding the right fit, someone you jive with, okay? Not every therapist will understand medical trauma, so that matters. So you're allowed to be thoughtful, you're allowed to be selective. You can look across Ontario or whatever province you're in. You don't have to stick with your area unless you really feel a need to have in person. Um, but it's not like the medical system where you're directed to a doctor and that's going to be your doctor. It's you get the choice here. So you're going to be spending time and money, and you want to make sure that you can have a relationship with that person that's safe and that you trust them and to tell them about how you're feeling and to be able to feel your feels in front of that person. So it's just so important to find that right person as well. Okay. So there's some questions for you to ask there. So just what experience do you have working with medical trauma or chronic illness? How do you incorporate the nervous system? What approaches do you use for processing trauma? I'm seeing the time. I'm sorry, I know I'm going a little over. I just think it's important, so I'm gonna stick on it. Um, but I just want to normalize that process there. If you meet a therapist and you just don't feel like it's the right fit, it's okay. Therapy is a relationship. You're not hurting any therapist's feelings if you want to keep looking around and finding someone else. Go for it. All psychotherapists, therapists in general, we support each other. We're not in competition with each other. So like kind of keep that in your mind too. Therapy is a relationship, okay? You want to feel understood, safe, and not rushed. It's essential for this kind of work. So finding the right person can take a little time, but just kind of know that that's part of the process and it's not a setback. It's just kind of what happens. All right. Okay. So, all right, so just quickly going over all the other webinars here. We talked about, there's 5 of them now. Talked about the emotional complexity of transplant, how trauma can happen today, long before surgery. We've talked about cognitive approaches to understanding and perceiving what you've went through or what you're going through. Talk about those body, that from that body lens, that nervous system and lens about how maybe healing, you need to kind of incorporate your body into healing. And then, yeah, just kind of pain and finding support along the journey was today. So, I hope that through these last 5 webinars, our next one's going to be directed at donor families. But I hope, recipients, caretakers, family, friends, if you've been watching, I hope that one of the most important things I'm really trying to get to you guys is that your responses make sense. Whether it's, those thoughts that are coming up, whether it's anxiety, overwhelm, emotional ups and downs, the cycles that you guys are going through, feeling differently, your identity, these things really, it makes sense. It's not something that's wrong with you. There's signals and signs that your system has been adaptive to a situation that required survival, and often over a long period of time. So as we begin to understand that, I hope you can notice some shifts, and maybe like less confusion or less self-blame, maybe to, shifting to more self-compassion, and maybe, understanding of yourself, right? Because your recovery here, although it's so physical, it's not just physical, right? And even when your body on, your blood work and all the things that your doctors tell you, it's stabilized. You're still, your nervous system and your brain, it's still carrying those patterns of protection, activation, and maybe a few unprocessed experiences. Okay. So that's where support, education, that your own gentle regulation using nature, it matters. So once again, you don't have to do that perfectly. You don't have to do it all at once, but you're working on that gradual kind of sense coming up. Okay, so as we close this part of the series, I'm just going to come back to kind of the question we're asking, I guess, is what helps people live well during this process and this journey, and not just, survive. Just making sense of that experience, allowing some space for those complex emotions, connecting to self and others, and asking for support when you need it. All right. So remind yourself this is integration, it's adjustment, and over time, you're rebuilding that sense of stability and meaning. All right. So yeah, I think, yeah, I'm way over time, but thanks for being a part of the conversation. It's not easy to engage with a lot of this psychoeducation, I guess you could call it. But the fact that you've taken time to be here really matters. Whether you're someone that's directly affected here, you're supporting someone else, or maybe you're just here learning more, your presence is meaningful. And as you leave here today, just want you to know you don't have to have everything all figured out. Small moments of understandings help those small shifts. And that's how you can start to relate to that experience, right? Small steps forward. It begins how you change how this lives in your entire system over time. Right. So yeah, thank you very much. I am gonna stop the recording. And yeah, I'll just say goodbye to anyone that's watching YouTube later. Thanks for watching, and I'll open up a question period too.